So after that, we will be getting to the tips, I believe. Yeah, we'll be getting to the tips. Now, yeah, like I said, Jack's obviously not here, but he has given me his votes, his tips, so we'll show them on the screen. But in the games we have coming up in Friday night is the Swans versus Carlton. This one's a big game for both clubs. If it wasn't for the fact that Sydney has so many injuries to their defence, I would be picking Sydney. But Carlton's game plan of bombing it onto the top of the heads of Mackay and Curnow will probably work against the Swans. It won't work against many other teams in the comp, but the fact that Sydney are going so short in defence, I think this will actually deplete Sydney. The fact is, though, that Carlton need to find a way to move forward without just gaining disposals for their midfielders. That's just not going to work. But Charlie Curnow has had a very good year, and he has played at a very good record against Sydney. Last year I was at the game in Melbourne against Carlton, and he kicked, I think, 6 goals, and he was brilliant. So I'm picking Carlton. I do think that they'll win this game. I would love to see Sydney win, but I just don't think they can hold up in defence with those two guys down there. Saturday afternoon is St Kilda versus Hawthorn. St Kilda should win this one. It's at Marvel Stadium. Hawthorn have shown in the past few weeks that they are pretty good if they can get the ball from clearance. And now Mitch Lewis is holding up in the forward line, but I think St Kilda win this one all day long. And they're very good at Marvel. And now that this week Hawthorn are playing a team with a defence that's not lower than waffle level, they should win this game, St Kilda, and lock Mitch Lewis away with Wilkie or Dougal Howard and win this one pretty comfortably. After that, we get to Melbourne versus Fremantle. I think Fremantle are a sneaky chance here. I would give them a lot more of a chance if this was in Perth. But last year, Fremantle were the first team to beat Melbourne, and it was in Victoria. So I'm giving Fremantle a slight chance because they have seemed to turn their form around. We'll see how Luke Jackson's reception is at the MCG. But I think you have to pick Melbourne. Even though they're losing Kate and Oliver for a couple of weeks, I still think that they're a little bit stronger. And Melbourne should run away with this one pretty simply. This is also my certainty pick for the week. So I did actually miss mine last week. So I actually have to catch up on a few of the punishments. I have to buy a Giants jumper and I have to pay for my brother's petrol. And now I also have to pay for $50 of his membership for next year. But sorry, I have been missing out on the past few of them. So yeah. After that, we get to the Saturday twilight game. This is Geelong versus the Giants down at GMHBA Stadium. I would be giving the Giants a bit of a chance here, but the fact that it's down in Geelong win this one pretty simply. My brother's put the certainty pick on Geelong to win this one, and I think he's pretty much got it. They're basically the only two you can pick from this week because all the teams that lost last week are playing against teams that are pretty good. So this is really the only two you can pick from these two games. So my brother's put the Geelong certainty pick on that one, and I've picked Geelong as well. I'm pretty much suspecting that Geelong will... I don't know if they'll dominate the Giants. Maybe it'll be a close one until about half-time, but eventually Geelong will just run away with this one as well. And considering the fact that Nick Haynes will be out most likely, along with Harry Himmelberg, I feel like Jeremy Cameron or Tom Hawkins, one of them two, will get away. Saturday night, the first game is down, in Darwin for the year. Gold Coast versus the Western Bulldogs. This one's, I think, a bit of a tough one. I personally am going to go with the Bulldogs just because they're in pretty good form at the moment. But I know my brother has gone for the Gold Coast Suns, and he's made a pretty good point, in fact, because they've gone from Ballarat last week, obviously being rainy, wet, cold, all they're going up to Darwin where it's going to be humid, it's going to be very different conditions. I do give the Gold Coast a chance here, but I just think I don't trust the Gold Coast, and I'd love to see them win this game, but I just feel like the Bulldogs, just with the runs on the board, I'm going to have to tip them. I'm not going to spend too much time on the next one, Essendon versus West Coast. I don't care if it's in Perth. West Coast are playing woeful football. Essendon win this one by 10 goals. I'm sorry, but they're playing woeful, and they don't seem to be changing anything. I know they've got a lot of injuries. I know that. But they've had these problems for years. They should be changing up their... They should have got rid of these guys who are injury prone. I know Luke Shuey's their leader, but he's so injury prone every single year. You don't have to... Maybe get rid of him. I know that's a big call, but maybe get rid of him. You got Andrew Gaff on the list. Useless since 2018. Send him out. You get something back for him. Jeremy McGovern you probably keep. But you've also got Nick Natanui. I know he's one of the best ruckmen in the competition for a number of years now, but he's so injury prone. Get rid of him. You get something back for it. You rework your list. They've got Bailey Williams and Callum Jamieson. I don't know if they're going to be, their next ruckman or whatever, but give him a go. I mean, you've given Bailey Williams a go for a year and a half. He seems like a pretty decent ruckman. Give him a go as the number one. See how it goes. Get something back. Get a couple of draft picks. You've only had really Jinby as your tired draft pick in the last 4 or 5 years, West Coast. It's not the injuries' fault. It's the way you've managed your list. Tim Kelly only came on this year after you threw out 3 top draft picks for him. That's your fault. Geelong used those 3 draft picks and they've used it. I don't know, actually remember what they used it on, but you know what I mean. This is not their fault. This is not the injuries. It's your list management. You've also had players like Shannon Hearn. I'm sorry to Shannon Hearn. He's been a great servant of your club, but he's got to go. He's got to retire. There's no need to keep him on this list. There are so many players for the West Coast Eagles who could go right now and just get some draft picks in or get some younger players in. I know that Hawthorn's recruitment has been questioned, but what they did was they got rid of their old players, bottomed out. They bottomed out too much. West Coast need to follow that structure, just keeping a couple of extra older players. Ridiculous. I shouldn't have spent that much time on West Coast because it frustrates me when they talk about injuries. Because it's not like a Collingwood or a Sydney or a St Kilda this year. Because Sydney have had them all plummeted down this year. Collingwood have had a lot of injuries. But they've also been able to hold up. And so have St Kilda. Now, I know West Coast have had a lot more than all 3 of them. But this has been going on for years. Stop blaming injuries and start recruiting some players who are not so injury prone. Now, Elliot Yeo, I know, is one as well. But he probably holds his spot at West Coast because I think he's their next captain with Jeremy McGovern. But anyway, after that we get to Sunday. Sorry that took so long, guys. But anyway, on to Sunday, Richmond versus Port Adelaide at the MCG. This is a big game because obviously this is going to be the first game without Damien Hardwick. So I'm going to be interested to see how Richmond go. And also how Port Adelaide go. They just took out a big club in Melbourne at home. This is a big chance. They don't usually play at the MCG very often. We saw they played Collingwood in round 2, I believe, at the MCG and got demolished. So I have picked Port Adelaide for this one, and I think Port Adelaide need to win this one as well. I actually think they got a lot of voter confidence from the AFL public last week, beating Melbourne. But I think even though Richmond are a lot lower than Melbourne, I think this is still a big game for Port Adelaide. So I do think that they'll win. I'll be interested to see how Richmond go, but for now, Port Adelaide should win this one. Maybe 3 or 4 goals. Next up, we get to Collingwood versus North Melbourne. I'll be interested to see how North Melbourne go this week because obviously last week they had a game and they just threw it away, essentially. Collingwood are in the best form out of pretty much any team in the comp at the moment. Collingwood will win this one, and I think pretty comfortably. I think as well they would have showed up. They would have showed up last week, North Melbourne, to show Alistair Clarkson they're still thinking of him, and Brett Ratton, I think, is a very good interim coach, but I think that Collingwood win this one. And I think the hype and all the standing up for Clarko last week will kind of diminish, and I think Collingwood will win this one pretty comfortably. But finally, we get to probably the game of the round, in my opinion, which I'm going to try and stream, which is Adelaide versus Brisbane. If this was in the Gabba, Brisbane win this one every day. But at Adelaide Oval, the Crows are brilliant at Adelaide Oval. They've almost locked it down as a fortress this year. And Brisbane aren't the best over here. They did win their game in Gather Round, but that was against North Melbourne. Who cares? They lost to the Power in round 1 at Adelaide Oval when no one really saw that coming. I think this is a huge danger game for the Lions. And in fact, I'm going to tip the Crows. Now, I know some people may sit there and say, how the hell could you pick the Crows when they lost last week to the Western Bulldogs and Brisbane are in some brilliant form? I'm going to tell you why, and I will change this tip if Taylor Walker's out. But the fact is, I still don't trust Brisbane's defence yet. I know Jackson Payne's came on this year, and he's done quite well. But a lot of their I still don't trust them enough. And I think the Crows can actually win this game, purely if they get the ball forward enough to Taylor Walker. He has to come back this week. If he doesn't, I'm changing my trip straight back to Brisbane. But if Taylor Walker plays, and they can get the ball forward enough, I'm picking the Crows, and I think they'll win this one. I think it'll be a close one. I think this game's going to be really good to see. But yeah, that's my tips for this week, guys.